Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's EchoMeans Business Network Live event, an ongoing series designed to help green industry pros across the globe connect, share, and learn from each other. Tonight's segment is going to be about building business credit. We've brought on some experts in the industry. We have Frank Bourque, who is a speaker. He is a business coach, and if you've ever done anything in the hardscape or landscape side of things, he is an ICPI and NCMA instructor. I have Kedma Ough, who is a speaker, author of Targeting Funding, and an expert in the field of lending practices and commercial finance. And Ryan Rothwell, who is a business banking and commercial lending specialist here in Massachusetts. What's going on, guys?
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
So what we're doing today is we really want to get the basics and the baby steps of how to establish credit in the green and hardscape industries. I think a lot of small business owners, particularly in this industry, are sometimes shy to ask some questions pertaining to leveraging debt. I think there's a lot of pride behind men and women that own these businesses that they want to pay cash for everything. I guess we can start, Ryan. I'll start with you real quick. How does a contractor or a small business owner start the steps of establishing credit, a business credit profile?
Yeah, so I think it's important to establish that as in a time where you don't need it too, because in my space, it seems that some clients come to me a little too late, where cash is depleted, assets are depleted, and they may not have the cash flow to support the needs. So it's always important to have that reserve on hand. I mean, given the economic conditions of this year as well too. I mean, we're seeing a lot of people now coming to us and requesting lines of credits to have some sort of reserve, but it starts with a simple conversation with your bank, asking about products that they offer. Sometimes they have simple products such as an unsecured line of credit. Sometimes they offer, only secured, collateral-based or asset-based lending, where cash flow and collateral are important factors to receive financing. So it starts with a simple conversation with your bank, directly your business banker, commercial lender, whoever it may be at your institution. But it's always important to have a good contact there and start the process essentially.
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. We have two types of people in this industry. I think we have the people that are very conservative with spending the money, and people that are gung-ho and they want to go out. Frank, as well as anybody, a mowing crew to be extremely efficient could cost upwards of $100,000 just to have inventory and equipment. On the hardscape side of things, $500,000. Where do you advise your clients to start seeking lines of credit or seeking financing?
Well, whether you're into maintenance or construction, I think the main reason why you would want to do that is to be able to grow as a business. To be able to have access to more money when you need it. It's more of a temporary option that is very valuable when it's available to you, but when it's not available to you, we have a tendency as entrepreneurs to go in the reserves, sometimes even deplete the reserves, and then we put ourselves at risk even more. And it's in business, as we all know, it's often a scenario of cash flow. It's always sometimes times are really good and we have a lot of cash coming in, and all of a sudden it slows down a bit and we've got our money tied up somewhere else. So to have access to is really the goal, to be able to operate a business as if there was always cash flow, but not to use that line of credit as if it was money that's ours. It's just something that's temporary that we go in when we need to. One of the mistakes that I did as an entrepreneur at first was that when you have access to that money, it's tempting. It's tempting, and I think the biggest lesson is to know how to manage your money before even considering getting access to more money, because if you are not aware of your numbers or how to make a profit, and you start getting into line of credits or credit cards or whatever else, you can max out everything so quickly just by not being able to manage the money first. So I think there's a few lessons that we can talk about tonight just to go in before even talking about getting a line of credit, because managing money, knowing your numbers, knowing how to make a profit, oftentimes the best lesson we can get as an entrepreneur is understanding how to make a profit, how to price stuff, so that on a regular basis, most of the time, we don't need that line of credit because we're making money, we have cash flow. But when we have opportunities to move the business in one direction and to have better cash flow, I think lines of credits for businesses are the way to go. But yeah.
And I think Frank brings up a great point too, it properly managing it too, because when you do have a line of credit in place, you know, we see it often here at the bank where people use their line of credit to purchase fixed assets, and that's really not what it's for. Like Frank mentioned, it's really to be paid back as quick as possible. It's really to bridge your gap between your receivables and your payables, short term, because it's a flexible loan option. So it's similar to a credit card where you have access whenever you need it. It's just the interest rates are a little bit better, and the collateral may be your accounts receivable. I mean, it gets challenging when. Because I think the typical turnaround time for, you know, billing an invoice is about 29 days in the landscaping industry, 29 to 44 days. So think about that. That's a service you have already provided. Now you're just waiting to collect payment on. So, I mean, that's ultimately where a line of credit would come into place to bridge that gap. And, you know, because you're still operating as usual within those 29 to 44 days. You still need cash to operate the business. So I think Frank brings up a lot of valuable points in that statement, in his statements he made.
Yeah. You mentioned something very important at first, Ryan, when you said that the best time to get one is when you don't need it. And that was actually advice that was given to me by a mentor at first I was using a lot of my personal money as an entrepreneur. We were growing a business, and we even hit, you know, when we had over 100 employees, we were still growing, and I was still picking into my own personal assets to try to finance. Someone sat down with me and said that, you know, like, you should probably start thinking about getting these things so that you can have access to it, and it's actually empowering instead of nerve-wracking to always just react instead of being proactive in situations. So I like that when you said that it's the best time to get one is when you don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that too, it's like, I know he mentions, you know, have a relationship with your bank, have a relationship with your commercial banker, but also have a relationship with your CPA too, because there's going to be some pivotal times where you're going to need to reach out, rely on their expertise, their tax advice, and all above. Yeah, just have a good relationship with your CPA, your bookkeeper, just so you're staying on top of your numbers as well, to have that flag to know when to reach out and look into the opportunity of getting a line of credit.
Kedma, looking at your webpage and seeing the type of small business owners that you work with, what do you typically come across when people are searching for funding or looking for these lines of credit to really fund the business as cash flow is really slow?
Yeah, I'm going to give a whole different focus. I've been just waiting to just talk. So I come from a whole different side of the coin. In 2001, I had to file bankruptcy because of a difficult situation. And it was the best decision I ever made, because I'm just going to be straight up. The banks weren't there for me. The CPA didn't care unless it was a tax return. There was just me and trying to figure out the game. 2 weeks later, I received my first credit card from Capital One, and I couldn't understand why a credit card company would give me a card after filing bankruptcy. It was that moment that I said, I'm going to go on a journey and uncover every fund and every resource and every opportunity so that I can figure out how the game is played. And I literally went from a credit score of 420 to 815. And I'm sorry, the banks were not there to support me. Okay. So I just want to be straight up that have listeners right now that the bank may not be their friend right now. And that's okay. It's like a balance sheet, snapshot in time. Lender, you're not here for me right now, but you may be there for me when I get to that position where there is a comfortable relationship. So the first thing I would say is I built my credit relationship on patterns. And the reality is that building credit is like a relationship. If you screw up the relationship, you have to go back and try to fix it until they trust you again. It's the same thing with lenders. And so I really began in what Ryan said, is like looking at equipment financing or looking at vehicle purchase, where they're like, listen, we know you don't have great credit, but we want this off the lot. You know, if you can agree to this, you know, it's going to be a higher term, but I'm building pattern. And so what I want to encourage is bad credit and no credit may be the same in the experience. If you're someone who has absolutely no interest in having credit and you're doing cash, you may realize, oh my God, my credit score is 550. Yeah. Because you haven't established that pattern, that relationship. So the first thing I would say is, to Frank's comment, do you need a line of credit? I agree with Ryan. Accounts receivable, asset-based lending, anything like that would make sense. Do you need it? And then the other question I have is, what other funding mechanisms can you use while you're waiting? So it doesn't have to be one focus. I believe in targeting, so looking at multiple opportunities and not just one. So what I come across every day of the week is that they want to desperately have the lender support them. And a lot of times it's just not viable based on the startup of the business, based on what their cash flow looks like, based on their collateral. So they have to earn that opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more if I just piggyback on that one, because I know Kedma, I know she's coming from a background that she's not only looking at one thing, but she's looking at the big picture. And I think there's a lot of different Kedma works with contractors every day. She's a coach, and she'll take anyone the way they are, just as is, and she'll bring them up to the next level. So I think what she just said about, you know, no matter if you have no credit or bad credit or little, or as little as it can get, the thing that you have to remember is there's a step-by-step process that you can take, and by having a variety of options, you're kind of empowering yourself as an entrepreneur. So I think that's an excellent place to start, and to know that that's the way it is for a lot of people. So
yeah, and just to even piggyback. I mean, Kedma brings up a lot of great points, and I think the other component that you mentioned was about the roadmap.
Yeah,
it's important to have a roadmap, whether it's you're working with your CPA, you're working with Frank, you're working with Kedma, or even some I know here in Massachusetts we have score.org, which is like a free mentoring program.
Yep. So
getting that roadmap to get to where you want to be is important to map out, obviously, and just because it's a no today doesn't mean it's a no a year from now, 2 years from now. So,
exactly.
So I just want to really drill down on having a plan, having a roadmap is being so crucial.
Yeah, I love that.
So, for the three of you, in your opinion, I think a lot of contractors, like Frankie mentioned earlier, will start depleting their own personal funds when they're starting their business. Out of desperation, I believe they run to the banks, they apply for credit cards to try to find lending, and then they find out that they have subpar credit and they don't qualify for the Sheffields or the Caterpillar or the Bobcats of the world. What would be a starting point for someone that just wants to have that resource available for them, but they don't necessarily have a DUNS number or a business credit score, and you know they're hovering around, you know, a below average credit score, average credit score? What would be your advice to any of the viewers tonight to start that process?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm just thinking there's so many ways of just starting the process of building credit, whether if it's a small amount on a credit card that you can use to and repay quickly, just to start building if you're really starting at zero. And, you know, if you have any assets as a company, oftentimes, you know, if you're just starting out, but you know, I've seen myself use some of my assets to just put in guarantee to be able to have access to a line of credit or something else like that. That's okay, but only if you respect the transaction. And the reason why I say that is if you know where your money is going and how you're going to be using it, then it's okay. But I've also seen myself get a line of credit at the wrong time and use it too much for the wrong reasons. And the business was not thriving at the time. And I was putting myself even more at risk by trying to dig into these line of credits and credit cards and all that stuff. So the trick, I think, is to really start small, to make the smart steps and like I said earlier, to know your numbers, to actually see a profit, to see an amount in the bank account is powerful, because when you're in the positive, you like to keep that number in there. When you're always in the negative and in line of credits or using credit cards, it's almost like you get used to that number as well. So I think you're better off just you know, starting slow in the sense that you have savings. You may have invested in certain places. You may have some assets because you're paying some stuff off gradually. And you know, Kedma, you have so many ways of doing this as well. You know, I'll pass you the mic here, because I know she did a whole hour on different ways to have access to more money, but the smart way. Well, in my opinion, the smart way. So
yeah, and what Frank is alluding to is I actually come from the grants world. I like to say I love giving free money away. I don't get excited late at night thinking about, wow, I gave Frank $100,000 in debt. It actually doesn't make me feel good. You know what I mean? And one of the things we have to step back is, first of all, a lot of startup businesses have what I call the pie in the sky. They want to be that next company. And so they get big eyes and they make foolish mistakes. One of my most difficult and favorite stories was a company I walked into, and you know, it was about a 3,000 square foot office. And when I tell you gorgeous, I mean, I thought like gold was everywhere. And I remember saying to the owner, I'm like, wow, I mean, how did you pay for all this? It's amazing. You guys must be killing it. And he said, on our credit card. Okay, they were out of business in 6 months, and my company took over their space, right? Because it's this idea that they sometimes want, but it's not what they need. The second thing I would look at is, where are they spending money now that they can negotiate differently, and then maybe leverage that money? So maybe they're, you know, spending too much on storage space, or maybe too much on a facility, or maybe they are, you know, they have too many people, you know. But is there a way for them to really think from that perspective, lean, and then support that? And then the third way, because you mentioned SCORE, Ryan, because I actually held leadership positions for both the Small Business Development Center and the Women's Business Center. I'm too young for SCORE, but I know SCORE inside and out, is economic development, economic development, economic development. I can go to any city, and literally in a few hours, I could have the phone ringing where the economic agencies are going to say, I cannot, who got this number? And how do you know about this program? Because a lot of times we have seeded funds hidden in those organizations because, first of all, they don't want to tell everybody because there's only so many. But second of all, the whole job around that is creating jobs. And this idea of contractors having an opportunity to create jobs, you may find funds. Most of the time in every state, I can find opportunities for people to hire someone, and the state or the city will pay for their time up to 6 months, usually, which translates into a $10,000 grant. Now, that may not sound like a lot of money, but for a startup company, that could be the difference of not getting a loan, but having a state agency support that. So in in kind of in recap, and then I'll pass it on, is sometimes the money we seek is already there. We just are not realizing it. And if we reshift how we're doing business, we may not need that line of credit right now. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear to Frank's comment. We may just have a business process problem.
Yeah.
And we're trying to fuel that with more debt. And that's not the problem. If we get more debt, we're still going to be in the hole. So we may have to talk to leadership, right? And I'm sure you've had this happen over and over again, Frank.
One of the first things we notice when people call us as consultants, they don't call because it's going well. Usually they call because they want it to go better, right? So when they call us, it's usually, hey, listen, we have a big problem. It's either with a financial issue or a growth issue, a team issue. And they tell us, listen, we've been doing this over and over and over. We're not sure what we need to change, but we know we need to change something. And when it's a money issue, the first thing that we look at, well, more than just money issues, it's where's the waste in the business. So, one of the first thing is, how do you spend your money? Why do you spend your money that way? How do you spend your time? And what kind of stuff do you invest in, and why? I see a lot of contractors with the best equipment, but they don't use it. So it's stored in the garage, or they figure out a way to get finance or to get a hold of that equipment, but they don't need it. Or I see some people renting it, but wasting a lot of money in having something that they barely use, but they're renting all year because they can't afford to finance it yet. And so to that point is, look at the waste in your business. It's almost like a spring cleaning. I tell my clients every year, like, okay, what can we clean out in the shop of finance and the shop of your equipment, everything else that you own. Take a look at what you use, why you have it, what's the reason for it. Some people hold on to stuff just because it feels good. Well, money is the same way. Is you could have so much more in the bank account. And like Kedma said, you may not even need that line of credit right now, but by having that money in the bank account, you may get a lot more from the bank for a line of credit if they see that you're managing your money well, right? So to Ryan's point earlier, the best time to get one is when you don't need it. It's perfect. Imagine if you have 50,000 or 25,000 in cash flow, and you go see the bank, and you seem to be managing your money very well. At that point in time, you have cash flow. You seem to be, investing in the right places. Well, the bank's going to look at you in a different way than if you're always at zero, barely managing, and now you need one because it's tight in money, and it's wasted in so many different places. So great point there, Kedma, because it's all about waste sometimes before even going anywhere else.
Yeah, both great points. And I think the ability to lean out the expenses, lean out the operation is a sign of a good manager. And I think that also comes with you want to take the time to have an understanding of the books. I see it where you may have a bookkeeper on staff or your CPA, but everything just gets thrown to them. Yeah. Take the time to maybe sit with them a couple of days a week and just understand and be on top of the books. Ask daily, but you want to try your best to have an understanding of what's going on in your business from a day-to-day standpoint, and have an understanding of your profit, your net income, where you're spending money, everything that's entailed in the financials.
Just a quick fact, for the industry, the average net profit in the landscape industry is 3% or less for most companies.
Wow.
And close to 93% of companies don't even run on a budget. I had a client with a $5 million in revenue, a yearly revenue, and they did not have a budget yet. And when I asked them to see, okay, let's check your numbers, because they were asking me if they could buy that next tractor or the next piece of machinery. And I said, well, let's check your budget. Let's put that in to see what it does to your numbers. And he said, budget, right? Because it was just a matter of, it's almost by habit. Yeah, I think we have the money. Let's go for it. I think it feels good, but we'll see. And then at the end of the year, you realize there's no profit left. So starting with a budget to know, like, okay, your typical sales, and and then your cost, right? Cost of goods sold, and then looking at your, all the other expenses, from your overhead expenses and your everything else that's tied to your business. But you also want to tie in some profit in there. Oftentimes people forget the overhead, which in the landscape industry, it's about 30% of your revenue goes to pay the shop, the marketing, all these things that you can't build directly to the client. And so it may look like you have between 30 to 40% in profit when you're making your pricing, but if you don't include the overhead in there, it's not gross, it's not net profit, it's gross profit. And so it's just an illusion. So when you end up with 3% at the end of the year, it's almost depressing, right? Thinking that, let's say on 100,000, it's $3,000 left in net profit. You can't go to the bank yet and ask for a line of credit with that in the bank, right? And so it's so important to really price every job to get out of it with that 10 to 15% net as a minimum in the landscape industry. And it's very rare, believe it or not, that people will hit that 15, and 20 is like your superstar, right? That's net profit. So
understanding margins is crucial, like Frank mentioned too. And keep in mind, in some of these landscaping services, I mean, maybe you don't snowplow in the winter, so there's some seasonality to this too. So managing cash flow, managing the books and margins becomes even more crucial when there's seasonality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to add two things that anyone listening can really look at. Number one, relationship with your lender, 1000%. Relationship with your economic agency, whether it's, Business Maryland, or in my case, Business Oregon. And then relationship with what we call micro lenders that are 10 employees or less. And the micro lenders are really set aside for job creation and what we call economic development. And you may be paying a higher percentage, but their underwriting is going to be a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit more lenient. I was on the loan committee for an organization called Mercy Corps. I'm sure you've heard of Mercy Corps. Well, Mercy Corps, based in Oregon, Mercy Corps Northwest, provides micro lending for startup businesses who may have a not ready yet bank relationship. The reason I want everyone to have a relation with their economic development organizations is they may not realize what funding is available. So in 2008, I purchased my own commercial office for $600,000. Now, Ryan is in the lending, so I'm going to tell Ryan and everyone else what I got. Instead of 20% down, no collateral required, no credit check, because I filed bankruptcy, 6% down, and my interest has been fixed now since 2008 at 0.04%. And I'm happy to send everyone a copy of it so you can see proof. That came from economic development, a program with Prosper Portland that wanted to provide what? Commercial ownership for small businesses. And so, if you don't know about it, you can't apply for it. I wasn't anything special, but I was immersed in economic development. When the opportunity came up, I applied, and I was one of, 15 other people who won the lottery. It didn't come up as a grant. It did not come up as a line of credit. But, my space is worth close to $1 million right now, and my mortgage is $1,200 a month. That's playing the game differently. And so I want to encourage anyone listening, if you do get your bank to say no, my bank said no to me. It's not the end of the world. It's just not right now. Don't get upset with them. Just put them in the space, because when you are growing, they're going to be there. They want to be there for you, but maybe their underwriting is restricted. And it may be hard to get you what you want right now in that situation. So economic development and micro lending programs.
Yeah, and you know what you said, Kedma, when you mentioned that it might not be the exact right time for the bank, but also know that you can get ready to go to the bank. Like there's a way to approach the bank. You can't just show up and say, hey, I would love a $25,000 line of credit, right? Trust me, I tried it many times starting out, and the bank, I mean, there's great people working there, just like Ryan, but they'll smile just like Ryan, and they'll explain exactly the steps to take. And I mean, Ryan, you can share your part of it in here, but I mean, when you approach the bank and you're able to show them that you have the capacity to pay for what you want, in terms of either a line of credit or a loan, and that you have some capital because you're able to save some money. You've got some proven, you've got some proof, you have some collateral, either on some equipment that's paid or something that you own. You know, there's all kinds of conditions that makes it possible for you to make it so that they see that you make money, you handle money well, and also your character as an entrepreneur. If they see that you have integrity and you have a business plan and you follow these steps, it's strategic. It's not just like, hey, like, we're not doing well, I'm not sure why, and then there's another problem, and there's this and there's that. They don't want to see you every time you have a problem. They want to see you when it's going well also, right? And it's a lot easier for them to trust that relationship, to have confidence in it when you show up in good times. So I would say, get your portfolio ready to show up there with a smile, and for them to be able to say like, wow, it's still not the good time, but you're just missing one thing, if that's the case. And then you go see Kedma, she gets you ready with something, and then you go back to Ryan, and then you're laughing, right? But what I want to say is just there's a way to approach the bank, and Kedma's absolutely right by saying there's a way that you can kind of take the back door, explore other options, get smart about other ways of having money, handling it well. Then the bank will look at you differently if that's the case, that you're having issues there. And Ryan, you can add to that too if you want.
Yeah, no, you guys, honestly, you guys covered it very well, so I won't dive too deep into it, but all great points. And I think the micro lender point is very important too, especially early on in the stages. It's definitely a little more challenging right now with the economic conditions and a lot of the question marks going on. But I think the ultimate goal is to graduate from the micro lender into the bank's hands.
Yes.
And the banks always tend to look backwards. You know, credit has the mindset of historical. They look backwards. They hardly look forwards. And that's where it's important to have a relationship with your lender too, to help paint that picture. You know, and maybe when you do approach the banks, hey, here's my historical numbers, but provide them with also 2 years of projections too. The more information, the more financials, the better for them. The 5 C's of credit, it goes back to, you know, the capacity, the capital, collateral, conditions, and then the character too. So those are all important avenues, and I think you guys really covered all those pretty well. So.
Yeah, I want to add something, because when it's so on the side, but it was so critical for me to get funds and negotiate with lenders. When you're out building your business, use your community as a way to leverage impact. I won so many awards that my husband said, you cannot bring another award to this house. I swear to you, I've won Champion of the Year, Influencer of the Year. But because I made such a strong space, when I went to negotiate with the lender, they're like, okay, if we get Kedma, all right, I know underwriting's underwriting, but you know, this is Kedma, you know, and Kedma will bring a lot of community value to us and connections to us. And even though they had this very strict, you know, underwriting, depending on the lender and the community connection, they are willing, even though they say they won't, they're willing to look at that. If you're bringing commodity, your company has brought such value and visibility, they're paying attention to that. Yeah. So I want to encourage you to think about, how do you bring your credibility, and not just, hey, I opened up a business, but, you know, are you doing something to bring back to the community? Because I think that will get the attention of these banks who do go to SCORE, who do go to the SBDC, who are at these award ceremonies. And I don't know how you feel about that, Ryan, but I know it's been a great success for me to use that as a leverage.
Yeah, for sure. And even from lending standpoints too, I mean, you know, we partner with the SBA a lot, because in a lot of cases we see where, you know, you have 4 out of the 5 C's going well, you know, cash flow is there, everything else is there, capacity is there, but maybe there's a shortfall in collateral. And it's great to bring in and utilize a program like the SBA, where they have some risk mitigation. So banks will partner with the SBA. I know here at Eastern, we do a lot. We actually have our own SBA team in-house even too. So it's a very crucial component too, to kind of maybe push you over that edge as well. But I think you covered it very well, Kedma.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
I was just going to add to what Ryan Kedma just mentioned. And when you're talking about putting yourself in a position where people see value, it's what landscapers do every day. They go out and sell their jobs, and they sell the value that they bring to the client. Well, you can bring that same value to the bank and say, like, by doing business with me, you will be making more money, but I will also be making more money and growing, because we're growing in the same direction. I'm doing this to grow. I'm not doing this to survive necessarily. Although a line of credit sometimes in COVID times, sometimes it's just to bridge you to that next work or
milestone.
Milestone. And at the same time, you're still operating in a healthy way. So you're still eliminating the waste, bringing value to community, like Kedma, and that's really the goal, is to put yourself in a position that the bank sees the value. And it starts in small steps. Someone was asking in the questions, how do you start when you're at zero? I think Kedma had just mentioned there's multiple ways. I had mentioned, you can start with a small, sometimes they'll give you a credit card for $500, just enough so you can pay something with it, and then pay it right back, and just start very, very small. And then they'll actually recognize you as someone who has credit as a company. But Ryan, what would you say to that point, just to kind of summarize the where you start when you have zero or no credit?
Yeah, so it's definitely a challenging component, but honestly, a lot of clients start with the secured credit cards, like you guys said, where you actually have to, to get $500, you have to give them $500. They hold it as collateral. You start building credit that way. On the personal side, and even on the business side, I believe they offer secured options too. So if that's where you got to start, where you really have zero, I mean, that's an option. But you definitely want to start there and start building credit, because ultimately the more credit you build, the more bankable you become.
I'm going to give a different perspective. And if someone came to me today and said, where should I build it? I'm based in Massachusetts, or I'm based in Arizona. I'm probably going to look at their personal financials, and 7 out of 10 times I'm going to recommend they work with an IDA provider. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but it stands for Individual Development Account. It's a government-led federal state program in the U.S. They may have some kind of variation in Canada, but it's what we call a hand up, not a handout. What that means is years and years ago, the government did interviews and would ask everyday, individuals how they were doing financially. And most people said, I'm broke. And so the surveyor said, well, we're going to come back in about 9 months and see how you're doing. Well, they'd go back, and the same person would say, well, I'm still broke. Well, then they'd go back a year later, and the guy or gal would say, no, I'm still broke. And the government's like, you can't be like broke for 20 years. Like, we have to figure out, is there something we could do? So they created a financial literacy program, which is a hand up, not a handout. Every single state has an IDA program. And one of the 4 components is for entrepreneurship. Now, how does this play in the real world? Depending on who you're working with, it could be a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1, 8-to-1. That means if Frank gets qualified and he goes into this program and it's a 5-to-1, and let's say they allow him to save $5,000 over 6 months. Now, it's not going to be tomorrow, but after 6 months, he's going to get that $5,000 back, plus his 5-to-1. So you're talking about $25,000 that he can use to build his business and does not have to repay back the money. And he can go through that program twice, as long as it's for different goals. So my point in saying this is I love line of credit. I don't want to take away from that. And if you can't get it, it's not the end of the world. You may be able to get something even better that you don't even know exists.
Yeah.
Good point. Really good point there, Kedma.
I'm with Kedma on it as well. I actually had to start out with the secured credit card through I think it was Chase. I walked into my bank and I actually did what Frank had mentioned earlier. And at that point, earlier on in my business, I didn't have a lot of overhead. And I was that superstar he was talking about, in the 20s, 30s, sometimes 40s. The bank laughed me out of town. I had below average credit at the time, and I didn't have a lot of collateral because we were renting equipment. And the goal was to get that line of credit so I could secure heavy equipment to do bigger and better jobs more efficiently. Kedma, the SBA laughed me out of the house. They didn't give me the services I needed. So I kind of want to back up to Frank's point earlier where, Ryan, if I was to come into that bank 7-8 years ago with my balance sheet, with my P&L, showing that I had a history of paying my vendors, that I had a good history with the bank, I didn't default on anything, would you look at me differently if I had that sheet versus someone that comes in and maybe has a 750 personal credit score with no business score?
So it's kind of a loaded question, but we would look at you, I think, either way and try to break down and create a roadmap. But ultimately, like from a bank's perspective, it's really cash flow and collateral are the biggest components of us, because cash flow is what pays loans. Collateral secures them, but cash flow is ultimately what pays loans. So we'd really have to dive into the financials to know more. And that's kind of the unique. It's unique with lending in general, especially from a bank's perspective. There's so many, no single deal is the same. So it really takes a lot of deep dive on our end to understand your financials, why you were looking for this amount, what led you to want that amount. I mean, there's a ton of components. So that's kind of tough question for me to answer ultimately, but moral of the story, there's a lot of factors that would be involved. But if you came in with all your financials and you had, good historical numbers, we would take a look at it. If you didn't have anything, we need financials to ultimately underwrite a deal. So that would be a key component.
What would be a time? How many years worth of financials would you guys be looking for?
Yeah, typically we like to see around 2 years worth of financials at a minimum. So 2 years on the business, 2 years on the personal. If we can get 3 years, that's great. But I mean, even at Eastern Bank, we do startup. So we've done them in the past. We've done projection-based deals as well, too. So it's not a no. It really is, hey, let's take a deep dive. Let's collect a personal financial statement. Let's see everything you have as a whole. Let's run this from a business standpoint, but let's also run this from a global perspective as well, too. So, a lot of banks, it maybe don't do the global. We'll just do the business. But we also want to make sure that we're not overextending our borrowers as well, too. So that's another key component. Or maybe, the business isn't where it needs to be, but from a global perspective, you are. So again, it would really take us some digging on our end to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kedma, we get a question in the comments about how do you go about applying for the IDA?
Yeah, really simple. You're just going to go onto a Google search and you're going to key in individual development account. If you try to key in grants, you'll never find it because we can't even say grants, but it's a matched savings grant. But you're going to key in your individual development account is what you would say, and then you would choose your state. That's one option. The other option, which I like, but it's a pain in the neck, is you can go to Prosperity Now. Prosperity, PROSPERITY, prosperitynow.org. And you're going to connect to programs. You're going to see this map, and you just have to hover on your state, and you're going to see multiple IDA options. Just to make it clear, the individual development account is not just for you as a startup. I know we're talking about startup, but I want to tell you the power of this. It can be used for entrepreneurship, which is starting your business. It could be used for education, or it could be used for home ownership. Now, why does that matter? Because if I'm working with Frank, and I'm trying to keep Frank's employees happy, and Frank says, I don't know what kind of benefits I can offer. I'm a little tight with cash flow. And I say, Frank, how do you think Ryan would feel, who's been working with you for the last 2 years, if you and I worked on a strategy to get him into a home IDA program, because he's been in that apartment with his girlfriend, and we're going to help him, he will be able to get closing costs, and we'll get him into a home in the next year and a half. Do you think Ryan would want to stay with you long term? Frank's going to say, of course, Kedma. So we can use the IDA to leverage benefits, which could mean helping your employees go back to college for something that will help your business, maybe business management, maybe marketing, maybe social media, and also for a home. And everything I'm telling you, I have helped clients make happen, and it's a game changer. So don't think IDA just for me, think IDA for me and my employees. So those are the two places, Prosperity Now, or just Google it, IDA program. And usually you're gonna get this in response, Josh. How did you find out about us? So don't be shocked because a lot of people don't know about the program.
That's huge. Yeah, great tip there.
Yeah, really good tip.
I actually just got a question through Instagram, and this is to the whole panel. During the winter months, would you recommend financing payroll? I guess more or less that's kind of short, but I'm assuming this is during the winter months where maybe these people plow or doing snow and ice management, and they may have recurring income through contracts, but not as consistent. I guess I'll let you guys run with this. Would you, if the money was on the table and consistently, would you suggest taking out that small short line of credit to cover payroll?
Well, I would say, and I know Kedma's just waiting to get in.
No, I'm gonna keep crying.
Yeah, but I just when I think about that, I think it's a yes, but under a few conditions. So let's say you have money that will be coming in. It's just not in yet. And you need to cover payroll for stuff that's going on in the wintertime. You're buying salt, you're paying fuel, paying payroll. I think that's acceptable if the cash flow is not there because there's payment due, there's receivables that are going to be coming in. That's the only way I would say that's a yes. If you're running out of money because you've had a bad season, I would say that this is exactly why people go out of business is, I mean, we've all had a bad year to the point where you're really, really scrambling, and I can empathize with anyone in that situation, 100%. I've been there more than once, but would I recommend it? No, I would look for other options. I would look at, okay, is there funding? Is there something I can do? Is there waste in my business? Is there something I can sell? Is there something I don't need? Where can I cut? And those services that I'm going to be paying for, let's say that payroll, is that profitable? Because if it's not, I'm actually literally just paying people to go work, but I'm not making any money. So it's literally just burning money away. And if it's not coming in somewhere else, you're going to be in trouble really quick. So that would be my quick answer to that one.
Yeah, it's a good point with the money coming back in too. And honestly, it's the flexibility of the lines of credits and to be able to pay them off quickly is what the banks want to see too. And a lot of times they'll have covenants. When you do get these lines of credits with banks, they'll have covenants. And one of the covenants that's usually put in place is a 30-day cleanup. And what that means is your line of credit needs to be zeroed out for 30 consecutive days because, as I mentioned earlier, they don't want you using these things for long-term or fixed asset purchases. That's not what the line of credit's for. It's ultimately to bridge that gap between your receivables and payables, like what Frank said, when you know money's coming in. So that's crucial because the ultimate goal is to get that thing paid down as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I am agreeing with both. And Frank, you're right. For me, it's like I wouldn't use it for payroll. I'm going to give another way I look at it. That's totally out of the box. You don't have to agree, but because I work in multiple industries, I steal a lot of their great ideas, right? Because sometimes we're fixed in one industry and we don't, I like to grab things. So one of the things I like to grab is are you in an environment where you know you're going to have pretty much dead months, right? Just because of the snow, you're not doing this, it doesn't work. And then you're stressed, right? What do I do with my staff, do I keep them on because I want to lose them? I love what the academic, because I come from academia, academic universities and teachers do. If you are married or have a relationship with a teacher, you know that for 10 months, they're getting paid. And for 2 months, what are they doing? They're traveling, they're having fun. What if you could design in your corporate values that the long-term employees, yeah, every month, maybe you're going to hold up a little bit of that money. It's going to an escrow. But for those 2 months, you get to ski while someone else is working. You get to enjoy family time. Would I want to join that company if I knew I'd have to work really hard for 10 months, but then I got 2 months off to play? Yes, I would, personally, right? But that's a different mindset shift, not seen in this industry, but seen in other industries that work very well. So I would think out of the box and see, you know, is there ways to gamify the months that you're doing really, really well and give yourself time off as well as your team, but they don't feel the crunch. And maybe you don't have to lay them off. So I just get a little nervous with payroll and not a lot of money coming in. That's just my you know, I'm a conservative consultant. And so I like to look at things in a different perspective. So that's my crazy out of the box.
But that's exactly why you would go see someone like Kedma, because when you're trying to see what am I doing wrong that I'm running out of money and I need a line of credit to pay for my winter months. That's, you know, when I said I was there because I just finished the season, didn't go well. Then you fall into a line of credit. Then you just max it out. The season starts again in the spring. That's for landscaping. It starts again in the spring. You're getting all these deposits. All of a sudden, there's cash flow. It's an illusion that you have an abundance of money. You're spending. You're buying equipment. You're paying. And then you get back to the fall season. Same situation. But now the line of credit is not at zero. You have a balance already on it. And then you sink even deeper for the next winter. And, you know, I've done it, learned the hard way, fixed the issue when when I seek the help, but save yourself the trouble. And if you're having issues with payroll and it's just not because of, you know, 1 or 2 clients that owe you money, it's just because you're operating in a way that you're not making money, then fix that problem first and then seek line of credits and all these other ways.
Yeah, and take the time to understand the books. I think that's ultimately what this all falls back on. Take the time to understand the books, where the money's coming in from, where it's going out to, just because it's absolutely crucial in running a successful business.
If I had to pinpoint one of my best moves as an entrepreneur is the day where I was having one of the worst days in business where you're looking at your books and you're like, man, I'm going to have to work another 3 months for basically nothing just to come back and pay some of these credit cards and all these things. So I seek some help at the time, you know, as a young entrepreneur, just starting out, not really knowing how to do it. And someone said, you know what, talk to a bookkeeper, because if you're not good with numbers yet, then that person will take care of that issue for you. And I just thought that would cost me a fortune, because you hear how much accountants will cost, but just having someone to put your numbers together, your receipts, and just finding out where you're at. That was the best $500 that I've ever paid for just having someone organize all my receipts. I would know month by month where I was, how much sales I had, you know, money coming in, money coming out. I could just open it and see it on my computer every time I needed to see those numbers. It wasn't guesswork anymore. So if you don't have a bookkeeper, that's
necessary.
necessary. And oftentimes we wait till we figure it out. But you know what? If you're not good with numbers, you don't like numbers, find someone who does. They'll get you more passionate about it for sure. But that would be my piece of advice.
That's a great point, Frank, because that frees up your time to do what you do best as well, too.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
I also want to make sure we don't rule out, you know, that it doesn't always have to be residential. There's nothing wrong with building commercial or going after procurement. I love procurement. For anyone listening, check out PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistant Contracting Program. It's in every state. and it's free. And this is like the lottery. You got to be in it to win it. And sometimes people go, oh, it's so daunting, and oh, I don't have time. You know, one of the contracts I won, I mean, it was a very small contract for $500,000, but I was sole source. Every the contract came up, every year I'm the only company to win it. So, you know, it may be a pain in the neck, but once you're in and maybe getting a contract, that may help you during those difficult times. Maybe you have a contract with a college, you know, to manage their system, or maybe it's, you know, maybe it's a, you know, a city. So I wouldn't rule that out depending on what your strategy is. I know that, you know, a lot of businesses during hard times literally lived on just commercial work, or work with, you know, with hospitals or universities. So I just want to call that out, especially if you're just thinking residential.
It's important to have that healthy blend too, and even from a banking perspective, you know, that's one of the first questions we ask is, what's your percentage of customers that are residential? What are your percentage of customers that are commercial? So it's a key component. So it's a great point you bring up, Kedma.
What would you recommend for someone? Is there a grant program when we talk about procurement, and especially when it comes to city and state? A lot of the times they ask you for a percentage of the contract up front in a bond. Is there a resource or a grant that's available to maybe someone that's starting out for, let's say, like excavation for water main lines in the town, and they get the contract and they need $21,000 to put up against the contract?
Well, that's why I love PTAC, because that is what they do, is they help navigate all the procurement issues. The other thing I want to make sure we're clear on is sometimes when we're starting out in building, we think we have to be the general contractor. Absolutely not. One of my favorite stories, I can't even make these up, they're just so exciting. One of my favorite stories was I was sitting in a conversation with all these procurement managers, and they spent an hour telling us of all the procedures of how to apply for the procurement program, if it's $100,000, if it's $500,000, if it's $1 million, and it was so many requirements. And they kind of slightly said, if it's anything 5,000 or under, you don't have to worry about it. Basically what happens is each department chooses 3 vendors they like, and they get a quote. So Kedma raises her hand and says, I'm just curious, you know, what percentage of your procurement bids are under 5,000? They said 80%. All right, well, that was the end of my conversation. All I had to do was build relationships with all the department heads, because I had to access 80%. I'm not even playing with that 20%. Now, if I wanted to play with that 20%, build the relation with the prime contractors who may be winning that 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, and they may be offsetting, bringing you in as a subcontractor and helping for that, because they may need you. They may need a certified small business owner, or someone who's veteran certified or woman-owned certified. And one more thing I'll tell you, I'll never forget this. About 10 years ago, I received a phone call from a company that won about a $20 million job for the airport. They found me on the vendor list, and they said, do you manage, you know, consulting and emergency preparedness? So no, I don't do it. No, I don't do emergency preparedness. I have no idea what to do. They said, well, the reason we're asking is we need someone to come in for 2 days. We will teach you everything, and we'll pay you $50,000. I said, you know what? I know a lot about emergency preparedness. I forgot. I will be happy to support you. And I literally got the contract because they had to that they were working with a particular business that was considered a small business, under a certain threshold. So, Josh, to your point, if you can't get it as a general contractor, maybe you go beneath and maybe build relationship with prime contractors that may need you because they need your status. They are not considered a small business. They have more than 500 employees, but they have to show that they're working with small business.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I want to touch base real quick on Dun & Bradstreet, and if there's importance behind them having the DUNS number. I know a lot of the basic, we're going back to the basic steps there, but as far as when you have an entity as a business, Is it smart to get a DUNS number? Is it smart to use their resources that they have to help you build that credit profile? Is that just a crock in a sales pitch? And the second part of that is it smart to go into this as a sole proprietor rather than having an entity using DUNS? I'll leave that to the whole panel. Ryan, we'll let you start off.
I'm gonna pass this over to Kedma or Frank, but yeah.
Kedma?
I think, you're going to need a DUNS number if you try to do anything with the government agencies. Bottom line. Okay, bottom line, you need one. It's not that hard. SAM.gov. There's a lot of companies that are exploit businesses and try to charge them a ridiculous amount of money. You don't have to go that route. There are wonderful organizations that can help you go through that, unless you want to just give their money away, and then you may have to use the line of credit to cover that. But short of that, I think that's a definite if you're going to do that. Secondly, if you came to me and said you were a sole proprietor in this business, I would lock my door in the office, would not be able to leave until you switch that structure, because unlimited liability is scary. At the very least, I'm going to say right now, I'm not a legal attorney and I'm not going to give you legal advice. But at the very least, single member LLC, limited liability. You don't want to have a situation where you're compromising your assets. You're going to lose your home. You're going to, it's just, to me, very nervous when someone comes in and they say they're a sole proprietor and they're working in someone's home, or even if they have liability insurance. That structure makes me nervous. So I would first and foremost say, please work with a legal team, determine what the best route is. And it depends on how you want to structure it. Some of my businesses, I have multiple LLCs. And actually on top of that, I have everything in a trust. Why? Because I think about every possible thing that could happen for my company and my family, and I protect it. So I would say either working with a financial planner or a legal team, pay for it up front so you don't pay for it in the back.
Yeah, CPAs too, because there's a lot of different tax implications too with the restructure. So I think definitely, attorney, CPA, definitely iron those out beforehand.
Yep.
My perception, I think there's a big majority of the lawn and landscape industry that are sole proprietors. Frank, I don't know how many you've worked with that don't think they need that structure hand in hand. I'm 100% against it. Is it? I mean,
it's a risk.
Fine. If someone comes into the bank as a sole prop and says they have, Jerry's landscaping, do you take him as serious as you would with someone with an entity?
Yeah. I mean, it's up to them how they want to structure it, and whether it's a doing business as or an LLC,
at the end of the day,
we'll look at it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you're managing a risk. So if you're structured in a way where you need something more than that's where you need a legal team to tell you, hey, you're at a point now, it's getting pretty risky, right? As your team is growing, as your company's growing, different contracts, you're getting into more commercial stuff, you're getting into governmental contracts. Your structure may change. I would say that most start as sole proprietors, and then they figure out really quickly that they should move on to a different entity or structure. So I would say, your first two employees or part of your team should be the legal and financial side of things, and then you can really start building something that makes sense a long term, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
if you get stuck and you're saying, I can't afford that, check with your local area. A lot of nonprofit organizations have small business legal clinics. Those legal clinics are managed by, students who are graduating as attorneys, but they have people that oversee it, and they do an incredible job to just educate and help navigate. If you feel like I don't have the money, I agree, CPA, Ryan. But if you're just saying I don't have the funds, just look outside the box. I do a lot of work with the small business legal clinics, and the majority of the time they're working on legal structure, how to set up a company. And then also I would be remiss if I told you not to do this. It's really important. If you have an incredible name, please consider a federal trademark. I have been involved in several situations where someone has started their business, built their company, built their brand, and another company in another state filed a federal trademark. And now there's a little bit of a hiccup. It doesn't mean you have to switch your name, but it may box you that you may be prevented by going to other locations. So if the name is important to you, you probably want to also check in with an attorney, an IP attorney. Since we're talking about startup, I've seen it happen enough times that it makes me nervous.
Looks like we're hitting that 1 hour mark, so we'll start wrapping this up. I feel like this could have went on a lot more. There's a lot of questions, and I feel like this is a not talked about subject a lot in the industry, and there's a lot to learn. I feel like there's so many different angles from what you guys are talking about as far as knowing your numbers before you get into commercial lending or lines of credit. I think everybody's retained a lot of resources. If any of the viewers that watch this tonight or moving forward wanted to reach out to any of you guys, is there a handle, an email, some way they could reach out to you? We'll start Frank Kedma, Ryan.
Okay.
Yeah. That's super simple. frankbourque.com is the best way to reach me. Even if it's just for a quick consultation to say, hey, I'm a small business owner. I have these issues or this situation. What can you suggest? If it's not me, the best resource, chances are I can at least point you in the right direction. So far, when we're on the financial topic and anything related to funding, I would say definitely start with Kedma, because Kedma is my best resource for when it comes to funding and pointing people in the right direction. So hopefully people listening to this who are looking for answers or direction, we're here to help.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank. That was so kind. For me, it's easy. It's kedmaough.com. And if you forget and just key in Kedma in Google, you'll only find me. If you find anyone else, run. You've one Kedma in the world. I love to have fun. I want to make sure I leave this. I love my lenders. I work with actually over 60 lenders. So I want to make sure we're clear. Lenders play an important role. And there was a question I want to wrap up on my end. Is it better to go with a bank or SBA? SBA is the oversight, and there are SBA lenders. They are the preferred lenders that have SBA. And to Ryan's comment, yes, during underwriting, SBA could create an opportunity for a loan guarantee that makes it easier for the lender to approve you. So you can definitely just key in and look at SBA lenders, and again, Eastern Bank has that in-house. So I do want to make sure that if you try to call SBA, they're going to refer you to a lender anyway. They don't actually write the checks. And I'll pass it to Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Kedma. So my contact, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Ryan Rothwell, the Ryan Rothwell that works for Eastern Bank. And then r.rothwell@easternbank.com. So feel free to reach out to me there. And then I kind of want to leave everybody with this too. I just read this from the Barlow Research Associates. 51% of landscape and horticultural services said they go to their accountant or bookkeeper for cash flow advice, while 7% turn to their banker, 22% turn to a colleague, but 30% don't seek advice at all. So wow. Don't be that 30%. Definitely reach out, build relationships, and look for whatever you need to. Reach out. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We're here to help.
I love that. Yeah.
Thanks,
all
everyone.
Right. Thank you for coming on. Hopefully I can reach out to you guys and we can set something up, whether a one-on-one or have another panel and go deeper into this. For anybody listening or watching, Echo Means Business is in our 6th year, is giving up this information and working to help promote knowledge throughout the green and hardscape industry. If you're not a member or registered for the EMB app or the forum, make sure you go to www.echomeansbusiness.com. and register. And guys, thanks again. This was a stealth of knowledge that you guys put out there. I appreciate it. Really do.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having us too. We appreciate it.
Definitely.
Thank you.